Can we ohm?
Can we
Yeah.
Can we It's not it's
Cody.
Do we need to hold hands to do this?
I'd love to.
No, I don't think we're gonna a remote view holding hands.
I had a cacao before I came here.
Of course you did.
My shirt's a bit too tight.
All right, you ready?
Okay.
This is what we do with spiritual people. We
Yes. So spiritual.
Right.
Spiritual.
Ready?
Steady.
Welcome to this week's episode of Courageous Leaders Changing the World. This week's episode, we have Mr. Spice himself, Mr. Navdeep Pasricha. That's how you say it,
Oh my God,
right?
you said my name correctly.
I'm that spicy that I can say your name correctly.
3 years in. We got it.
It's better than some other people. Like, I remember one of my other guests on the podcast, Burr. She didn't tell me that her name was not Bernice, because her name is Berenice. That's how it's spelled. But I called her Bernice for 3 years, and someone else said to her, Berenice. And I'm like, no, it's Bernice. And Burr's like, oh, no, it's actually. And I'm like, what? You let me for 3 years call you the wrong name.
Wow.
Yeah. She copped it after that.
I'm feeling that way with Vuja. He calls me Nav. I don't like it.
Yes, I know. I see it every single time. And because he does it, then other people do it too.
Yeah, I know.
It's just like,
But then I remember what you said about Kirtan. And I try to transcend my moral judgments.
great. Love it. So the name of the podcast is Courageous Leaders Changing the World. What has been an experience in your life or business where you've had to draw upon all the courage within you to be able to get through it?
Every year. Yeah.
Every year?
Every year.
Time? Is there a specific time or?
Yeah. I remember one time when I was in university, I was entering an agreement with our university to run a leadership summit for high school students. This is back in 2015, 16. And my own university dropped me. And just somebody telling me no in that fashion and me being like embarrassed in front of my team, I just got so angry. And so I remember I went on like this European bus tour with my mother, and in the daytime we'd go sightseeing, and at nighttime she'd go to sleep in the same hotel room, and then I'd be like cold LinkedIn messaging all these people. And that's how I ended up landing like speaking engagements and organizing a speaking tour with another speaker as well at places like PwC, NAB, Bendigo Bank, ANZ, and places like this. And I think I was 19, maybe 20, but it was just the idea of being said no to that really like got me saying no. And yeah, yeah.
So no was a big initiator for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It happened again when I got said no to a mortgage. That was a huge thing. It's actually really curious now. I remember when I found out that I used to go through like a financial dip when I got broken up with, and then make like a huge amount of money. And I got reflected to that this might be a pattern. And so I was like, maybe it's healthier for me to have a more stable relationship with money and love. But at that time, that was my reality.
Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting. What's the thing that you're facing off with right now?
Finally, we're here. All right. Thanks for asking. Not knowing if this is it.
Juicy. That's a big one.
Yeah. When I can like intellectually crack a code or crack a challenge, I kind of feel satisfied, almost to a point where doing it in the real life isn't as exhilarating. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like today, I actually made progress towards a code I've been trying to crack for a while that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is this really what I want to do? And I did my cash flow and like, I'm in a pretty cozy position. I'm like, oh, now what? Everybody's like, when you go into a sales conversation, embody the frequency that you don't need them as the client. And then somehow when I'm like not needing clients, I'm like, oh, do I even want to get on a sales call? But I feel like I was just thinking this on the way here. I feel like my my soft girl era of being like, kirtan, living in a wood, it's kind of past.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I go into a meditation ceremony tomorrow and I trust something will land there.
Great.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the thing that you're facing off with? Is it the changing of seasons, or how would you assimilate that?
What is worth my eros?
What is worth your eros?
Yeah.
Jesus, mate.
Yeah. What is worth my eros?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like a life's work.
What do you mean?
Like that question is like a life's work. It's like, what is actually worth my eros? What is worth putting my life force energy into something?
Yeah.
What is actually worth that? We're having conversations with Vuja like a lot recently, and it's like, all of us go to the gym yesterday, and then he's like, all right, so you come in for burgers? And I'm like, nah. And he's like, you love burgers? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go see my son. And it's like, I'm not going to put my life force energy into all of these things. It was the same as like the Sunday at the event that we're at. It's like, are you coming tomorrow? It's like, no. I'm going to put my life force energy. I'm going to put my eros into the things that are lighting me up the most, the things that are most important to me. That's why like that tiny little statement is like a life's work. That's like.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So what is the current answer that you have for that? What is worth your eros?
Yeah, it's interesting, hey? Like yesterday, a friend of ours, Nicole Gibson, she kind of had a whole 360 and a 180 and went into the tech world.
Yeah.
I was like, this superpower that God has bestowed upon me of connecting people. I'm like, how do I do this at scale?
Yeah.
I went on a walk with Alex yesterday and I was like, no, but how do I do it at scale? I'm like, I don't want to like go down the route of raising capital. But anyways, right now it's really, something that, does it actually? Yeah. Something that spices up my soul is supporting like ambitious entrepreneurs to scale with more speed by mastering their emotional fitness and the emotional poetry.
Emotional poetry. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. It's wild. So I remember there was a time where I was a systems consultant. So a client was already doing early millions, wanting to scale. And they could have, what's a good analogy? Like you can have all the systems and structures in place. Like you can just have this rhythm. I used to be a guitar teacher, but it's only when you have the poetry on top, like do you like have the structure? But the poetry is the part that makes you feel alive. So isn't it curious that I'm actually teaching what I'm learning? If I was to say it in more 3D language, it's like you can have the best system structures and scaling strategy in the world. But if your inner world isn't optimized and you're leaving money on the table, aren't you?
Good framing.
Thanks.
Where did you learn that from? So one of the things that happens a lot with me and Navdeep, some of you will notice, is we like to have a lot of fun when we do things. Is that right? Yeah. And we like to frame each other in different ways, and it's always an unending competition whether he's aware of it or not. He loses, so.
I lose the need to compete in arenas that are performing.
you lose the frame game all of the time to me.
I know, I'm framing you now. I like the way we have unique frames as well. Like you have that facial frame.
The facial frame.
And I have a good comedy frame. No, it's like this. Yeah. Some of these ones.
That's guitar framing.
Bro! Listen, man.
So for context, guitar, like
you need to do holographics on it.
I had to do a holographics process on Navdeep because of his guitaring. I'm not the only one who's done a holographic process on his guitaring, mind you. But what happened was he unendingly plays guitar and has a struggle to be able to read the energy of the room. So sometimes we have to give him cues that are not so subtle. Sometimes they're a little bit more subtle.
So what he's saying is I inspire people to use holographics more. You're welcome. This is fun.
So, yes. And one of the other pieces that I love most about Navdeep is his outrageous expression. You can kind of hear it in the laughter and all of these things. It's one of these things that is, I want to use magnetic, but it doesn't do it justice. It's enlivening is probably more like it. So we're in Estonia, and Navdeep's teaching us how to connect with people, playing his guitar on stage, doing the thing, running around, doing all of the different things. I'm having a great time. And at the same time, I'm also like, is he going to teach anything in this? Or is he just going to play his guitar and sing Amazing Grace? I don't know the rest.
Right.
Of this. Oh, no,
Thank you.
it's always interesting as well, the different energies of like people you're interviewing. So like this is the same energy as like Burr. It's like activator energy.
Yeah.
But we've had like Lewis, Corey, those people, it's like crusader energy. It's like it was the same for Vuja. But then like Keisha, it's like more flowy. So it's interesting to be able to see the different energy, right? Yeah.
Wow.
So, back to podcast life, not just a conversation between us.
Do you know many seven-figure connectors?
Yeah, I know a few. So for those of you who don't know, I've got to translate for podcast people.
Oh, yeah.
What we're talking about is our epigenetic expression. So our epigenetic expression is how our genes are expressing ourselves. And that is, we have a system that we utilize for that so that they can understand people based on certain archetypes that they play out. I'm an activator. Navdeep is an activator. Some of our previous guests are activators and different expressions there. Typically, connector seven-figure business owners are really, 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 really great at things like multi-level marketing because they're enrolling people all the time. That's how they like to lead. That's how it plays out. So there's plenty.
Cool.
But they do business in an entirely different way. Like how I do business is going to be entirely different to how you do business. And, that's one of the things that starts to play out for people when they get into business. It's like, oh, I'm going to go do this thing over here. And it's like, well, that's a beautiful shiny object over there. That's very nice. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? We get distracted by those things rather than going, okay, cool. Who am I? What do I like to do? And then how do I work to my strengths? An example of that is if you're an in-person person like Mr. Spicy over here, then you probably do in-person things. If you're great behind a camera, then you probably do behind-the-camera things. So what are the core things that you've learned about your unique strengths in terms of how you work with people?
Thanks for asking. In person?
Is one, yeah. Cool. What else?
Oh my gosh, this is so curious. It's almost like I can see this pattern of me like outsourcing my power to a strategy, saying I need a strategy, being given the strategy, saying fuck you to the strategy, and then creating my own.
Yeah.
So that's really curious. Like I remember I joined a 30K mastermind, 36K at the start of my coaching career, and it was all about cold DMs.
Yeah.
Or DMs. And I got most of my clients through in-person networking. Wild, eh? So I think what you said earlier about the vortex thing is really landing with me. Yeah. And so it was so beautiful, dude. Like I was listening to 10X versus 2X and I wrote a list of where I was at in business over the last 10 years, like each year by year, and then where I was at in romance. And I was like, wow, this is Navdeep 10 years ago would be bewildered right now.
So what are the pieces that you've learned about yourself then? What are the unique strengths that you bring to the world that you've recognized in terms of going through all of those journeys, all of those investments?
Thanks. I think one is my rawness. I've had 3 multi-7-figure entrepreneurs come in my kitchen recently, and then we go for a walk on the golf course. And you can always see like this look in their eyes. They seem really like taken aback by interaction. you know?
That's most people that meet you, but continue.
Like, we're going for a walk in the golf course. I have my shirt off. We're passing around a footy. You know, they're like, this is so different. You know, they're meeting my family. And somehow with that rawness, it invites them into their own rawness. And somehow, like, I wouldn't say that I'm the top of mind of people, but I would say I'm definitely top of heart for a lot of people. Like, I might not hear from somebody for 6 months, but then they'll present me with a really juicy opportunity or an invitation. You know what I mean? There's some sort of like karmic ripple effect that happens when you hold space for people who are typically the space holders. Like Vuja. It's like, Navdeep, you do really well in that capacity, you know? So I think one of my superpowers is building amazing relationships. I think my second superpower is speed. But what's really curious is like my relationship with the word impossible. Oh, dude, so this was so interesting. Eh? Remember last year I was like, yeah, let's do an in-person event, a preview event. And in 10 days, we got 60 people. I was like, yeah, that's cool, you know? I've done it before, 8 days to 100 people. And what I realized about myself is, am I recognizing myself right now? No, I'm not. I'm already thinking about the buts. That's so interesting. The question was, what are my unique strengths? Building really deep relationships. Opening doors. And there's one more. Reinventing myself. If I look at like how many industries I've played in, education, tech startups, coaching, sales consultancy, you know, and now I'm going back to a different world now, it's really curious. It's like, oh, I've changed worlds many times. You know, there was a time where all I wanted to be was a musician and I was deep in the music world. Yeah. So that agility, it's quite beautiful. Like I was hanging out with kids the other day and 2 days ago and I was like, oh, me changing markets. I used to work with schools. Like the government was my client, you know. It's like a completely different subsection of people. And so I'm so curious. Now 50 years from now, imagine how many different chapters he would have explored.
Yeah, I love that. What would you, if someone recognized that they were quite transactional in their business interactions and they're looking at transitioning from transactional to relational, how would you teach that person to make that transition?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, the first is, okay, how do you move from transactional to relational? The first is you really want to be able to identify the person's passion point. So what are they passionate about? I remember Steve Baxter, he used to be a judge in Shark Tank. We judged a startup competition together in like 2018-ish. And his passion point was fishing. And so whilst everybody would be talking to him about startups and stuff like this, I say, hey, how's the latest fishing journey? And then he'd give me more time of day. There was another guy, he was a billionaire. His name was Mark. What was his passion point? Swimming. Really just swimming. And so I'd elicit and then start to talk about swimming. So number one is find out what the person's passion point is beyond business. So it's really funny. I'll ask Espen how's life and he'll tell me all about his business. He'll ask me how's life. I'm like, man, I found this new hot yoga place. And you can see his face being like, huh? But when you can find a person's passion beyond business, it helps. The second is invite somebody to an activity. Like I invite people I love to hot yoga or to something, right? Can you invite them to an activity to have a different contextual experience? Kind of like the 7-11-4 thing. But the third is, yeah, I remember this was a conversation with Tuckwood. If you can just share what's sweet and sour and you share first. So what I find is I'll voice message somebody and say what's going on in their life, and then they'll give me a surface level answer. But if I say what's going on with what's sweet in my life is this, this, and this, and what's sour in my life is this and this, so maybe I'll tell you right now. So what's sweet in my life is I feel like a really beautiful sense of community here in Australia. Like it's kind of like a crew, a squad. I really like it. It's like so enlivening.
Go squad. Represent.
Just feeling my heart and see everybody so many times a week. You know, I went to Oxley today and yesterday.
Did you go to what time?
Today?
Yeah, we were there.
What?
What time were you there?
1:30.
Oh yeah, we left at 12:30.
No way.
So we would have just missed you.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Tripod came over yesterday and left a phone at mine place. So
oops.
yeah. But anyway, so that's really sweet. I'm loving it because I always said like I want to live in a place where you bump into people randomly. And yeah, I love that. And what sour is, it's not as sour as it was 48 hours ago. It's just I think I know what it is. Am I bored? Yeah. I'm a bit bored, Cody. I'm a bit bored. Do you remember when we had that conversation about there being another level of speaking?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is after I had spoken for like nearly a decade. Yeah. I'm a bit bored.
Interesting. What's that next level of speaking then? Bigger, wider, deeper?
Yeah, this is really interesting. Part of me feels like going back to a community where I was really involved in before my spiritual awakening. It's kind of like going backwards. What is my next level of speaking? I say 5-day events because that sounds logical, but I don't really know right now.
Cool.
But even this question is a blessing. Yeah. I don't know, bro. It used to be like interventions and shit, eh? And then it was having no slides. I was pretty preachy when we did Diverge together. Remember that?
Preachy. Yeah, you were definitely in preacher energy when we were in that event.
Yeah. I haven't done that for a while.
Yeah. So for context, Diverge was like a multi-speaker event we ran a little while ago, and Mr. Spice here was the MC and brought his preacher energy to that. So yeah, what's a piece of you that you are afraid to be able to bring to the stage?
To the stage?
Yeah.
That's curious. Externally processed. My softness, no. My aggression, no. Yeah, my certainty.
Your certainty.
Yeah.
Oh.
My absolute conviction.
Yep.
Like when I heard Vuja speak a couple of days ago, I was like, what? You know, dragons and stuff. But he's absolute conviction.
Yep.
And like, he doesn't do a lot of framing. But he's like, I don't need to, you know? Or Nat with live language. Absolute conviction. And I think that level of conviction of just like, yeah, this is what it is. I like to be inclusive. I'm pretty good at conflict resolving, but I feel like I can bring more of a full stop into my speaking. This is the way it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Love that. Yeah, I definitely think for me it's like play still.
Really?
Yeah, like it's like the full spectrum of like chaos play though. So like you know, I can have the frame go way out and then bring it back in, and it's just like, well, I think, you know, just keeping it going and going and going and going and going and going and going would probably definitely be an edge for me. There's like I have the capacity for absolute certainty. That's easy. Well, it's not easy. That's an ongoing edge because you keep pushing further and further and further into it with that, because the level of certainty and knowing that you have in your work grows over a period of time and you're willing to go so far. But then it's like, well, how do I push beyond that? That's definitely an ongoing thing. But I think that piece of, yeah, like I have wild people like you in the room and I'm okay with that. But I think like a room of 50 people, 50 Keesias and Navdeeps, that are going off in all their own directions, I think that would definitely be an edge for me. Like some of our other clients and stuff that are just like work, they're easy to be able to work with. But then other people, it's like when they're going off in different directions, having a people of 50 people like that would be a great edge. It's like 50 intuitive people off on their own little ADHD tangents. Has your shirt
come off?
Of course.
Yeah.
One of the things as well with Mr. Spice over here is that throughout the process, he starts to get into it and he starts to take his shirt off.
I feel so much better now.
You know that he's in it when his clothes are off. Like before that, it's like, this is the mask that I'm wearing of how I've got it all together, all of the things. And then it's like, now I'm naked. Now I'm being raw and real. It's the performance of it.
Maybe. What? It's a performance of being raw and real. What is raw reality? Yeah, something I'm thinking of. It's really curious, eh? When I was in Bali, I could just sit out on the veranda and look at the trees for like an hour. And I feel like I can do that again more now here. So what I'm trying to say is, I think a part of me is judging myself for not having that eros as prevalent as it used to be. But you know, I was having dinner with Nat and we're talking about how money-wise I'm good. There's no kind of, I have to make this work, you know? And this is a really curious thing about conviction that I think I have an internal conflict in my head. When I'm watching somebody else like presenting, I know that they're presenting an opportunity vehicle. And it's the quality of your life is the quality of your insert opportunity vehicle here, you know? Yeah. And so, bro, can I just check? Most of the people listening are like coaches, consultants, speakers, right? Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Okay, this makes sense. Okay. Because my morning was like spent framing to people who are not. Yeah. I'm getting used to playing in that frame again. Anyway, so I just have this inner conflict of like, whenever somebody's like pitching me in a way that is predictable in that opportunity vehicle frame, I know what's happening. I'm like, no, actually, I don't need this thing. It's a choice, you know? And so when I'm presenting my own opportunity vehicle, I'm like, you know, Russell Brunson says do it in a way where they believe that they need this thing. But I'm like, you don't actually need it. Do you already? Perfect, whole, and complete. So where do I find that intersection of like conviction that this is it? Whereas then I know that you're taking care of it no matter what.
Well, that's the journey of life, isn't it? It's that intersection point, you know, like that's normally what people's magic is as well. It's like, what are you intersecting? What are you bringing? Like, so for me, it's like business, spirituality. Let's bring those two things together. Let's have the intersection of those things and actually create that being one pathway. So what were the two pieces again? There was...
Hey, if you ever want to create like an EO that's spiritual, let me know, yeah?
Our conversations with Navdeep are very not non-linear in case you haven't noticed. But I want to ever create an EO entrepreneur organization. Okay, thank you.
Because it's the intersection.
Yeah, everything's an intersection.
I feel like we're going to do something together.
Yeah, definitely. That's how it works, remember? You become a client, then you become a partner, remember?
Yeah.
So what were the intersecting points we had?
For you, business and spirituality.
Yeah, but for you were telling two intersecting points.
Oh, right. So for me, it was the intersection of
certainty and
you don't really need anything.
You don't need anything. Yeah. Yeah. I can only speak from my experience and my journey with that kind of paradox is when you recognize the potency of your work and you recognize that they don't need it and going through it will be massively supportive of them and could be the perfect for them in that moment, then you come from that deeper sense of commitment knowing to actually pitch it as if they do need it.
Oh.
The distinction for me is if I can come from this place of non-attachment, of
outcome,
not needing them to do it, but I can frame it in a way knowing what they will get from it, knowing that it's an invitation, knowing that I'm saying, hey, you see this thing here? You can have that if you want. You don't need to have it. I'm going to love you either way. And I know what this will open up for you. Will this be the last thing that you ever do? No. This will be the next thing. And even if it's not the next thing, it might be something that's the next thing. But when we come from that energetic frequency, then that's an entirely different energy around it. But if you don't actually go into this is the thing, then what happens is you don't actually serve the people it needs to hear that this is the thing. Because when people have that level of discernment, if they've heard all of those things all the times before, then they can recognize that that's a very, very, very specific thing. This is the thing that is perfect from here to here, but then from over here to here, you need something different. And that's part of the journey of journeying that deeper sense of integrity of you doing that as a someone who sells from stage, is to be able to recognize, okay, cool, this is 100%, this is the thing. I'm willing to sell it as the thing.
Yeah.
This is the thing.
Yeah.
And in your mind, from here to here.
Okay. That really helps.
This is the thing. This is the greatest thing for these people from here to here. And then when you're there, then you need something else. And that level of integrity internally to be able to come from that energetic frequency, that's what opens people up, because it's like, holy fuck. That person has a deeper sense of knowing and love and commitment to what they're creating.
Yeah.
Because they also recognize that even if they frame it as that, there are going to be certain people that it's going to turn off. Like if you do that in NLP form and people have done tons of work on themselves, then they're going to be like, no, that's not for me. Because of the way that you're doing it is also congruent with the way that that person needs to hear it. That's my take on it.
Very cool.
What's your take on it?
Yeah, it makes sense. Remember you once told me, and like, I remember you brought up like this Facebook post of somebody who said, I think it was that old paradigm of, only listen to people, only take parenting advice from people who are the best parents in the world.
Yeah.
You brought up a post. There's this chick, she talked about how life is giving you lessons all day, every day. It's just how attuned are you to it? And I feel like I'm 20 times more attuned to it now than I was when I first heard that. But then I was like, what the fuck do you mean? Now I'm like, whether I'm being supported by a coach formally or not, life's bringing me the answers every day, every way. It's just the speed of it. Maybe.
Yep.
But at that time, I wouldn't have had a bar of it. I was like, what do you mean? And so the reconciliation that I'm creating now, is that the people I'm serving haven't had that epiphany yet.
I haven't had what epiphany?
The epiphany that life is every day and every way giving them the lessons.
Yeah, that's because I haven't been through holographics.
What a frame.
But it's true though, because that's something that you recognize only in hindsight after you've been through holographics.
Wow.
That's recognizing that is the exact transition of those people. It's like all of those people would be benefit from going through that, or what your version of that is. Because again, some people aren't going to receive my transmission. Some people are never going to go through holographics. Some people need the hollow spice.
Hollow spice. I like that. The deep spice.
The deep spice.
Full spice?
Full spice.
Yeah. What's Cody journeying?
Is this my podcast or your podcast?
I mean, it's a round circle.
It's a round table.
Wish I would call it a synarchy. I don't know what that means.
Well, I don't call it a synarchy. It's a holoarchy.
Wow.
So synarchy is slightly different in terms of a synarchy. I'll answer your question.
Thanks, buddy.
Chill. Just let me park it so I can do these pieces first. So synarchy is everyone is equal. Everyone is of equal value. And each person is perfectly fulfilled in the role that they're in. That's synarchy. So holoarchy is recognizing, so typically when you look at synarchy, I see it as a flat surface. Whereas holoarchy is very similar. Every person is whole within that. The system is a whole as a whole. And every single person is in their perfect role, but typically people are perceived to be above certain people. And as soon as someone is perceived to be above someone, then that instantly creates a polarization there that they want to bridge that gap. So it creates inspiration for someone to actually level up. So they're slight little distinctions of differences between how I see holarchy and synarchy. Back to what I'm journeying, in what area would you love to know?
I just want to say, I really enjoy experiencing each other in this context. We've already
You say that like every context.
Yeah, but we also
he's like, we're in this Airbnb in
really do I?
in Estonia, and he's like, I really like us in this context. I like experiencing in this. This is more, when we're no longer in client coach relationship. I'm just like, I really love you in this. And then then we're at Chakra having dinner at his favorite Indian restaurant in the middle of Estonia. And he's like, I really love you in this context. I'm really loving experiencing you in this.
Do I really say
Yes. and we all have those things that we're so blind to that we do all of the time. So for me,
You're screaming what?
So the only way that I recognize those is if someone feeds it back to me, right? Or it used to be that I would like edit my own videos, and that meant that I'd recognize all of these little intricacies. I remember when I was doing PT, I did these 60-second videos. It's like I would answer a question in 60 seconds or less, and I did hundreds of these. Wow. Hundreds and hundreds. They're still on YouTube. Go to Chase and Gaines on YouTube, and you'll see hundreds of these 60-second answers. And I did the editing of them. And that was when I recognized I filled everything with I was like, I had the filler. And in editing out every single one of those sometimes like 30 in 30 seconds, I learned how to stop saying Wow. Now if I do an it's more conscious. It's like I'm going to fill this space with something, but I'm going to do it in a conscious way. So that's my journey.
Conscious fillers.
Conscious fillers, yes.
So what's sweet and sour in your heart, bro?
What's sweet and sour in which area of life?
I'm taking this as like a friendship catch-up that happens to be on camera.
I can tell how you're trying to frame it. So I need it.
It's a round table game.
I need the area of life, please.
We're in a circle.
We're in a circle. We're holding hands energetically.
Michael's telling me to put my shirt on.
What area of life would you like to know what is sweet and spicy?
The one that's interesting. Sweet and spicy, not sweet and sour. The one that is most alive for you. It's the one that's at the forefront of your heart, bro.
What is sweet and spicy? Let's talk about podcasting sweet and spicy.
Okay.
Because that's where we are. We're podcasting. What is sweet for me is having deep, fun, fulfilling conversations, which is why I've run so many podcasts over the years. Like,
really?
Yeah.
Huh.
I think this might be like my 4th or 5th one. And I'm very seasonal with it. So it's like, oh my God, podcasts. And then it's
feels.
Oh, yawn.
Yeah.
And I think the sweet part of that is also, high quality podcast, getting it better every single time. And then the sour, probably the sour of it is it's a very difficult thing to be present for. So I remember when I was interviewing James, I'm like, in my mind, I'm like noticing how unpresent or disconnected that I'm being. I'm like, oh my God, that's going to be so good on a reel. And then I'm like, I'm not being present. And then I'm also facilitating myself through becoming back to present. And then also thinking about, okay, cool. What's the next question? Okay, cool. is he going to keep going for a little bit? Do I need to worry about the next question or do I just be present?
Yeah.
And it's like that sour experience is the recognition of how quickly I become disconnected and how quickly I go back into my head. It's like back to facilitating the conversation, back to what's the next question, back to what the thing is. And although I love that about not being scripted, it's a very magnifying reflection of my lack of presence. Like most people won't catch it, but it's very magnifying for me to be able to go, am I being present or am I thinking about what's next, what this is, when I need to finish the podcast by how I need to get the car after this because Jackie has the car and then I go and pick up my son Max and all of those things, and knowing that my phone's on airplane mode right now and I don't know if the car will be here when I finish because the car is required because also
I'll drop you off.
Let me externally process.
Sorry.
I'm journeying all of those things because, and I think the primary piece is the time piece because it's like, I've got to finish the podcast on time, got to manage time. And then the next time piece of like, as an example, like podcast studio, if you go too long over, then you go into the next time block.
Oh.
The same thing happens with picking up my son. It's like if you're 1 minute late after 4 o'clock, then they start charging you per minute.
1 minute.
Yeah, 1 minute. So, I've probably been late once in the last year. But there's that time pressure of like, it costs me to be late. It costs me money to be late. And it's very on the forefront, but in that moment, it costs me to be disconnected and thinking about time as well, right? Wow. So that's like one of the things that I'm journeying just even in the experience of podcast life. So, yeah.
Wow.
And I think that's like most people don't bring that level of reflection to the things that they're doing. They don't bring that level of introspection of going, well, how am I showing up in this moment? They just show up and they're like, I'm showing up, I'm doing the thing. They don't take that feedback of going, well, where am I at like in this moment? If I'm scoring myself, like I rarely do this. I used to do this more to start to look at it of going, okay, cool, well, how present am I? 0 to 10. 0 to 10. And if you're a coach and a facilitator, this is a really great activity to do it with a partner, and they're the one judging you on how present you are. So this is I want to say a David Data thing, where it's like your partner, the person in front of you says, okay, cool, you're a 5 out of 10 in presence. And then when you become more present, like 6, 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, 3, 2, like why? Because it brings up all of the different things. But most people don't live their life like that. They don't live their life of actually like going, what is the quality of presence that I'm bringing to this conversation? I think that other dynamic that you notice, especially with this podcast, with compared to other ones, is like contextualizing. It's like how do I contextualize epigenetic expressions, because not everyone's going to know that, and that is one of the things that's made me a better speaker than anything else. It's that unending questioning of going, is that landing? And then why isn't it landing? So I can create new context around that to make it actually land.
Yeah.
Who am I losing in this moment? Is it worth me explaining that? So as an example, like it came up for me before when you said 7-11-4, I'm like, do I need to contextualize that in my mind? The facilitator in me goes, do I need to contextualize that to explain what that is to people so they understand what we're talking about, so that it's not just something that is curious to them? So that dance of that, I think it's, well, not everyone, not every NLP teaches this, but in NLP they talk about metaposition. So that the version of that is we've got me in my position, you've got you in your position, and then we've got the observer position.
Yeah.
So the observer's watching. There are other positions of observing, and all of that kind of stuff, but that's a little bit more woo-woo. And the position, the more positions that you can hold, the more expansion of your energetic holding capacity that you have. So the more positions that you can hold, the more chairs that you can sit in around the different perceptions. Because if we have different chairs around all of these things, they're going to see things in an entirely different way. The way that I speak, the way that I facilitate is I've got at least one chair doing a check of, is that landing?
Wow.
Who is that landing for? Is it worth me creating different context or framing it in a different way to be able to have it be a deeper experience for that person? Or do I keep going knowing that that person's not going to get that piece, knowing that that can land at a different point in time?
Wow.
So, people say all the time, I wish I had your brain. Because they see all the models and all the things and you're like, well, little do you know how wild and wacky it is in there. Like all of these different things. Because also when that becomes... I was in this 3-day event and they're like, all right, so what is the predominant archetype that you fall into to shame yourself? And it's like, mine's like the critic. Like I'm critical of everything. It's like what creates all of my success, but then I also call in all these clients that want to be criticized. So my entire business is based on what I'm really good at, but that doesn't actually create change for people. I actually just create all of their same shaming mechanisms of people going, I'm going to fucking tell you how it is and I'm going to criticize the fuck out of you because you want to be criticized on an unconscious level to be able to have that come back to you. So you create a business from that place rather than creating a business from presence. Yeah, I actually messaged you after that event. Because I was like, Navdeep, I just want to thank you.
Yeah.
Because I was like being present in that moment. I was just like, I've journeyed so much with Navdeep. It's been amazing. I've given him a good punch in the face almost every day for years on end to make sure he grows. What would happen if I actually gave him some love for once? And I was just present to who he was for me in my life. And, that's part of my journey for this year. It's presence, heart. How do I bring my heart into things more?
Wow.
How do I bring my heart forth? How do I open myself up to a new level? How do I bring more of my heart into things? Like, well, I can bring more intellect into things. Easy, boring.
Wow.
Like, how do I bring my heart into things?
Such a good question.
What's the question that you ask yourself the most? That's my question for the year. I've got my shame statements of get your fucking shit together, you stupid cunt. That's a different frame. What's the question that you ask yourself the most? Because that's going to determine what you create for this year.
The shame mechanism, I think, is what am I doing with my life?
Mine's get your shit together.
Wow.
Like I'm facilitating in Nat's room and I'm at the back and in my mind I'm just like, get your fucking shit together. You've got to nail these next 3 frames, otherwise this falls apart.
Wow.
So what's your question? This is gonna be our dovetail into our ending.
Ending? What do you mean? We just got here. Are you serious? I have another hour in me, bro.
Yes, I have a son.
I feel like we can cut the part before the shirt came off.
Surprised you even wore one.
So your question is, what's my primary question?
Yeah.
Well, like I mentioned, it was, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah. What's the primary question that is leading you into this year of what you're like? So a primary question can be the shaming mechanism, or it can be what is the primary question that you keep asking the entire year that determines what you're going to create for that year?
Where? How? Who? Or how? Who? Who can I recognize more in this moment? Yes?
No.
Who can I recognize myself as in this moment? Oh, who can I recognize myself as in this moment? Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah. It's like, what archetype am I embodying? And then giving myself a pat on the back for embodying that archetype.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an ongoing journey for all of us, right? It's that willingness to be able to recognize who we're being in any moment, who we've become, who we're being, without needing to make who we've been wrong.
Oh, bro. Yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword I've been experiencing as I reflect now, as I've been back in the Gold Coast. The community is amazing, and I find myself like subtly comparing myself more. Like, do I have to be as loud? Do I have to be as this to achieve that? Do I have to be as that to achieve this? So, for example, even when I walked in today and the first 10 minutes of this podcast, I didn't have a sense of deep aliveness. I was like, oh, shouldn't I just be able to change my state? I had huge aliveness when I walked in and we hugged and stuff. But I don't know what was going on the first 10 minutes. But just being okay with that.
Yeah.
It's interesting, eh? And like part of me is like, will the listener not even make it to the rest of the podcast because of the first 10 minutes? But then I think the people who are meant to will.
What would be your parting words for people for this podcast?
Are we actually done?
Yeah.
Was that an hour? We went slow, bro. That's insane.
We're in what?
Huh?
What were we in?
Flow.
Oh.
It's almost like there's a formula for it.
There's a formula for that, right?
What are my parting words? Yeah, it comes back to your earlier question of going from a transactional relationship to a more relational relationship. Like, the viewers and listeners would have noticed a moment where the dynamic of this conversation shifted, right? I think it started with you asking me about my edge as a speaker, and then I asked about you what's sweet and spicy. And a great question for people to ask, even when it's a business relationship. There are two questions. The first is, how can I shower this person with more love? And the second is, how can I invite more depth into this relationship?
Love it. Perfect thing to wrap up on. Thank you so much, Mr. Spice, Navdeep Pasricha. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's been great to experience you in this context.
Classic.